The rope burned into Olivia Carson's wrists as she sat in the corner of the adobe barn, watching the three men count money by lamplight while discussing her fate like she was nothing more than a horse being traded at auction. She had made the mistake of traveling west alone after her father's death, believing the promises of a stagecoach driver who said he knew honest work in California. But instead, she had woken up 3 days ago in this hellish place south of Placerville, California, with her belongings stolen and her freedom stolen along with them. "She will bring us 200 across the border," the tall one named Riker said, his voice rough as gravel. "Maybe more if we clean her up before dawn. Those brothel owners in Tijuana pay good money for blonde women." Olivia felt bile rise in her throat. She had heard whispers about such things happening to women who traveled alone, but she had never imagined she would become one of those cautionary tales mothers told their daughters. Her father had raised her to be strong, to believe in the goodness of people, but these men had shown her a darkness she had not known existed. She pulled at the ropes again, feeling the hemp dig deeper into her already raw skin, but the knots held firm. "We leave at first light," the second man said, shorter and stockier than Riker with a scar running down his left cheek. 4 hours until dawn. I will get the horses ready." The third man, silent until now, stood up from where he had been sitting against the wall. "Someone is outside." All three men froze, hands moving to their guns. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs as she heard it too, the soft sound of boots crunching on dry earth, deliberate and unhurried. The footsteps stopped just outside the barn door. "Open up," a voice called out, deep and commanding. "I am looking for my horse. Heard you boys might have found him wandering." Riker exchanged glances with the other two men, then moved toward the door, his hand resting on his revolver. "Ain't seen no stray horses around here, friend. Best move along." "That is interesting," the voice replied, still calm, "because I tracked his prints right to your barn. Distinctive shoe on the left front hoof. Mind if I take a look? I mind plenty. Now get off my property before I put a bullet in you." What happened next occurred so fast that Olivia barely had time to process it. The barn door exploded inward with a crash, and a tall figure rolled through, firing twice before the three men could even draw their weapons. The scarred man went down immediately, clutching his shoulder. The silent one dove behind a stack of hay bales, returning fire, but the stranger was already moving, impossibly quick for someone his size. Another shot rang out, and the silent man collapsed with a cry of pain. Riker had his gun out now, pointing it directly at Olivia. "One more move and the girl dies." The stranger straightened slowly, and in the lamplight, Olivia finally got a good look at him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build that spoke of years of hard work. His dark hair fell almost to his collar beneath a weathered brown hat, and his eyes, a startling shade of blue, assessed the situation with the kind of cold calculation that came from experience. He could not have been much older than 25, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had faced death before and won. "You do not want to do that," the stranger said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, which somehow made it more menacing. "Because if you hurt her, I will make sure you die very slowly. But if you put the gun down now, I will let you ride out of here with your life. Your friends, too, if they can still sit a horse." "Who the hell are you?" Riker demanded, sweat beading on his forehead. "Name is Beckett Brooks. I am a bounty hunter, and I have been tracking you boys for 3 weeks. You are wanted in Colorado for kidnapping and selling women into slavery. There is a $500 reward on your heads, but I will settle for freeing this girl and watching you disappear into Mexico, where I do not have to look at your faces anymore." Olivia watched the calculation happening behind Riker's eyes. He knew he was beaten, but pride was a dangerous thing in desperate men. His finger tightened on the trigger, and Olivia squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the impact. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, but the pain never came. When Olivia opened her eyes, Riker was on the ground, screaming and clutching his hand where Beckett's bullet had shattered his gun along with several of his fingers. The revolver lay in pieces on the dirt floor. Beckett crossed the space in 3 long strides and kicked the gun fragments away, then turned to Olivia. His expression softened when he saw her bound and terrified in the corner. "It is all right now," he said quietly, kneeling beside her and pulling a knife from his boot. "I am going to cut these ropes. You are safe." The moment the ropes fell away, Olivia's hands flew to her face and she began to sob, great shuddering breaths that came from somewhere deep inside where she had been holding her terror at bay. Beckett did not try to touch her or comfort her with empty words. He simply stayed kneeling beside her, giving her space to fall apart, his presence solid and steady. "Can you stand?" he asked after a few moments, his voice gentle. Olivia nodded, wiping her eyes with shaking hands. Beckett offered his arm and she took it, letting him help her to her feet. Her legs were unsteady after hours of sitting in the same position, but she forced herself to stay upright. "What about them?" she asked, looking at the 3 men. The scarred one and the silent one were both conscious but injured, while Riker continued to moan and curse, cradling his mangled hand. "They are going to collect their friends here and ride south like their lives depend on it," Beckett said, his eyes never leaving the men. "Because they do. If I ever see any of you north of the border again, I will not be so generous with my aim. Understood?" The 3 men scrambled to gather themselves, helping each other stumble toward the door. Within minutes, Olivia heard horses galloping away into the night, leaving her alone with the man who had saved her life. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "I do not know what would have happened if you had not come." "You do not need to thank me," Beckett said, finally holstering his gun. "But we should get out of here in case they decide to grow some courage and come back with reinforcements. Do you have belongings? Anywhere you need to go?" "They took everything," Olivia admitted, shame heating her cheeks. "My money, my bags, even my mother's ring. I was trying to get to Placerville to find work, but the stagecoach driver, he brought me here instead and sold me to those men." Beckett's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "The driver, do you remember his name?" "Cormac. He had red hair and a crooked nose. I know him. He has done this before." Beckett's voice was flat, but Olivia could hear the anger beneath it. "Come on. I have a camp about a mile north of here. You can rest there tonight, and in the morning I will take you into Placerville. You can decide what you want to do from there." Olivia hesitated. She did not know this man, had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had saved her from a terrible fate. But she also had no other options, and something in his steady gaze and quiet manner made her feel safer than she had in days. "All right," she said. "Thank you." The walk to Beckett's camp took longer than expected because Olivia's legs kept threatening to give out beneath her. She had not eaten properly in days, and the fear and adrenaline were catching up with her. Finally, without asking permission, Beckett simply scooped her up into his arms and carried her the rest of the way. Olivia wanted to protest, to insist she could manage on her own, but exhaustion won out, and she let her head rest against his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat. His camp was simple but well organized. A small fire with a coffee pot hanging over it, bedrolls spread out near a cluster of rocks that provided shelter from the wind, and his horse, a magnificent black stallion, tethered nearby. Beckett set Olivia down gently near the fire and handed her a canteen. Drink slowly, he instructed. And I will heat up some beans. Nothing fancy, but it will put something in your stomach. Olivia did as he said, taking small sips of water while she watched him move around the camp with practiced efficiency. He heated the beans in a small pot, then served her a generous portion with some hardtack bread. It was the best meal she had ever tasted. "How did you find me?" she asked between bites. "You said you were tracking those men, but how did you know I was there?" "I did not," Beckett admitted, settling down across the fire from her. "I have been following Riker and his gang for weeks, trying to catch them in the act. I knew they were operating somewhere between here and the border, kidnapping women and selling them across the line. Tonight I finally tracked them to that barn. Finding you there was fortunate timing." "Fortunate for me," Olivia said softly. "You saved my life." "You would have found a way out," Beckett replied, but his eyes were kind. "You have fight in you, I could see it." "I do not feel very strong right now. Strength is not about never being afraid. It is about what you do when you are terrified." He poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot, the steam rising in the cool night air. "You can have my bedroll tonight." "I will keep watch in case those men get stupid ideas about revenge." "I cannot take your bed," Olivia protested. "It is not up for debate. You need rest more than I do." His tone was firm but not unkind. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Olivia wanted to argue further, but her body was already pulling her toward sleep. She moved to the bedroll and lay down, pulling the blanket up to her chin. It smelled like leather and wood smoke and something else, something distinctly masculine that should have made her uncomfortable but instead made her feel safe. "Beckett," she called softly. "Yes." "Why do you do this? Hunt bad men, I mean. It seems dangerous." There was a long pause before he answered. "My sister was taken by men like Riker when I was 18. I was too young, too inexperienced to save her. By the time I tracked down where they had taken her, she was already gone, sold to a brothel in Mexico City. I never found her." His voice was carefully controlled, but Olivia heard the grief beneath it. "So now I make sure other men's sisters make it home safe." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "I am so sorry." "Sleep now," Beckett said, his silhouette dark against the firelight. "You are safe here." And despite everything that had happened, despite being alone in the wilderness with a man she barely knew, Olivia believed him. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, the first real rest she had known in days. When she woke, dawn was painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Beckett was saddling his horse, moving with the same quiet efficiency he had shown the night before. Olivia sat up, her body aching but her mind clearer than it had been. "Good morning," Beckett said, glancing over at her. "There is coffee in the pot and some jerky if you are hungry. We will head into Placerville as soon as you are ready." Olivia helped herself to the coffee, savoring the bitter warmth, and ate the jerky despite its toughness. She felt more human with food and rest in her system, more like the woman she had been before this nightmare began. "I have been thinking," she said as Beckett finished packing up his camp. "I do not have any money or prospects in Placerville. I do not even know anyone there. Maybe I should just go back east, try to start over somewhere familiar." "Is that what you want?" Beckett asked, pausing in his work to look at her directly. "I do not know what I want anymore," Olivia admitted. "I came west because my father always talked about the opportunities here, the chance to build something new, but now everything feels ruined." Beckett was quiet for a moment, then said, "Nothing is ruined unless you decide it is. What happened to you was terrible, but it does not define you. You are still the same woman who had the courage to travel west alone. That kind of courage does not just disappear." His words stirred something in Olivia's chest, a spark of the determination that had brought her this far. "You are right," she said slowly. I did not come all this way to give up at the first obstacle. That is the spirit." Beckett offered her a small smile, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face completely. He looked younger, more approachable and devastatingly handsome in the morning light. They rode into Placerville together, Olivia sitting in front of Beckett on his horse since she had no mount of her own. The town was already bustling with activity despite the early hour. Miners and merchants going about their business, women in calico dresses shopping at the general store, children playing in the dusty streets. It was exactly the kind of place Olivia had imagined when she dreamed of the West, full of possibility and life. Beckett stopped first at the sheriff's office, a small wooden building with bars on the windows. He helped Olivia down from the horse, his hand strong and steady on her waist, then led her inside where a middle-aged man with a silver star pinned to his vest was sitting behind a desk. "Beckett Brooks," the sheriff said, looking up with a mixture of surprise and wariness. "What brings you to my town?" "Found this young lady being held by the Riker gang about 5 miles south of here," Beckett explained. "They were planning to sell her across the border at dawn. Thought you should know they are still operating in the area." The sheriff's expression darkened. "That gang has been a plague on this county for months. We have had 3 women go missing in the last 6 weeks. Did you bring them in?" "I let them go with a warning and some new injuries," Beckett said flatly, "but I will bring them in properly if you want them. It will just take me a few days to track them down again." "Do it," the sheriff said. "There is a $500 reward from the Colorado Territory, and I will add another $200 from the county fund. These men need to face justice." Beckett nodded, then turned to Olivia. "The sheriff can help you file a report about what happened and about the stagecoach driver who sold you. That might help you recover some of your losses." Olivia spent the next hour telling her story to the sheriff, who took careful notes and promised to look into the stagecoach company that had employed the red-haired driver named Cormac. When she was finished, she stepped back outside to find Beckett waiting for her, leaning against a post with his arms crossed over his chest. "All done?" he asked. "Yes." The sheriff was very helpful. He said there is a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson who might have a room available and possibly work for me. "That is good news." Beckett straightened up, and Olivia realized with a sinking feeling that this was goodbye. He had done what he set out to do, saved her and brought her to safety. There was no reason for him to stay. "I suppose you need to go track down those men," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "That is the plan." He studied her face for a long moment, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "But first let me take you to this boarding house and make sure you are settled." Relief flooded through Olivia, even though she knew she was only delaying the inevitable. They walked together through the streets of Placerville, drawing curious looks from passers-by. Olivia was acutely aware of how she must appear, her dress dirty and torn, her hair a tangled mess, walking beside this tall, dangerous-looking man. But Beckett seemed oblivious to the stairs, focused entirely on navigating them through the crowded streets. The boarding house was a neat, 2-story building painted white with blue shutters. A sign hanging from the porch proclaimed it to be Patterson's lodging, and a garden of wildflowers bloomed along the front walk. Beckett knocked on the door, and after a moment, it was opened by a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked brown hair. "Can I help you?" she asked, her gaze moving between Beckett and Olivia with obvious curiosity. "Are you Mrs. Patterson?" Beckett asked. When she nodded, he continued, "The sheriff said you might have a room available for this young lady. Her name is Olivia Carson. She has had some trouble and needs a safe place to stay while she gets back on her feet. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened immediately as she took in Olivia's bedraggled appearance. "Oh, you poor dear. Of course I have a room. Come in, come in." She ushered them both inside to a cozy parlor decorated with lace doilies and watercolor paintings of mountain scenes. "Sit down and I will get you some tea. You look like you have been through an ordeal." While Mrs. Patterson bustled off to the kitchen, Olivia sank gratefully into an overstuffed chair. Beckett remained standing, his hat in his hands, looking somewhat out of place in the feminine space. "You do not have to stay," Olivia said quietly. "I know you need to go after those men." "They can wait another hour," Beckett replied. "I want to make sure you are truly all right before I leave, Mrs. Patterson returned with a tea tray and spent the next few minutes fussing over Olivia, pouring tea and offering cookies and asking gentle questions about where she was from and what had brought her to Placerville. Olivia found herself opening up to the kindly widow, telling her about her father's death and her decision to come west, though she left out the worst details of what had happened with Riker and his gang. "Well, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need," Mrs. Patterson declared. "The room is 50 cents a week, meals included, and as it happens, I could use some help around the house. My arthritis has been acting up something fierce, making it hard to keep up with the cooking and cleaning. If you are willing to work, I can reduce your rent to 25 cents a week." "That would be wonderful," Olivia said, feeling tears of gratitude prick at her eyes. "Thank you so much. It is settled then." Mrs. Patterson beamed at her, then turned to Beckett. "And what about you, young man? Are you staying in town long? I have another room available if you need one." "Thank you, madam, but I will be heading out shortly," Beckett said. He set his hat back on his head and looked at Olivia. "Can I speak with you outside for a moment?" Olivia followed him onto the porch, her heart beating faster. The morning sun was fully up now, warming the air and gilding everything in golden light. Beckett stood with his back to the street, his expression serious. "I will be gone for at least a week, maybe 2, he said, "tracking those men and bringing them back to face justice. But when I return, I would like to check on you, make sure you are doing all right here." "You do not have to do that," Olivia said, even though the thought of seeing him again made something flutter in her chest. "You have already done so much for me." "I want to," Beckett said simply. "If that is all right with you." Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice. There was something happening between them, something she did not fully understand but could feel as surely as the warmth of the sun on her skin. This man had saved her life, had shown her kindness when she needed it most, and now she found herself not wanting him to leave. "Be careful," she managed to say. "Those men are dangerous." "So am I," Beckett replied, but his eyes were warm. "Take care of yourself, Olivia Carson. I will see you soon." He tipped his hat to her and walked away, his long stride carrying him quickly down the street toward where his horse was tethered. Olivia watched until he disappeared around a corner, then went back inside to begin her new life. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of hard work and gradual healing. Mrs. Patterson was true to her word, providing Olivia with a clean room and 3 meals a day in exchange for help with cooking, cleaning, and tending the garden. The work was physically demanding but satisfying, and Olivia found that keeping busy helped quiet the nightmares that still plagued her sleep. She also found that Mrs. Patterson was a wonderful companion, full of stories about Placerville's history and the various characters who called the town home. The older woman had lived in California since before the gold rush, arriving with her husband in 1848 to try their fortune in the mines. They had not struck it rich, but they had built a good life together before he passed away 5 years earlier. "I miss him every day," Mrs. Patterson confided one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen, making bread for the week. but I have learned that grief does not mean the end of happiness. There is still so much to be grateful for, so much beauty in the world if you know where to look." Her words resonated with Olivia, who was slowly coming to terms with everything she had lost and everything she had survived. The sheriff had managed to track down the stagecoach driver Cormac and arrest him for fraud and conspiracy. He had confessed to working with the Riker gang, receiving payment for every woman he delivered to them. Some of Olivia's belongings had been recovered, including her mother's ring, which the sheriff returned to her with a solemn promise that justice would be served. But as grateful as Olivia was for these developments, she found her thoughts constantly drifting to Beckett. She wondered where he was, whether he had caught up with the gang, whether he was safe. She told herself it was simply gratitude, natural concern for someone who had helped her, but she knew it was more than that. In the brief time they had spent together, Beckett had made her feel seen and valued in a way no one else ever had. On the 15th day after he had left, Olivia was hanging laundry in the back garden when she heard Mrs. Patterson call from the house. "Olivia, dear, you have a visitor." Her heart leapt into her throat as she hurried inside, wiping her damp hands on her apron. Beckett was standing in the parlor, hat in hand, looking tired but unharmed. Their eyes met across the room and everything else seemed to fade away. "Hello," he said, and even that simple word made her smile. "Hello," she replied. "You are back." "I am. The Riker gang is now in custody awaiting trial, all three of them." He paused, then added quietly, "I also found 2 other women they had been holding, got them back to their families." "That is wonderful," Olivia said, meaning it. "You saved them just like you saved me." "I will leave you 2 to catch up," Mrs. Patterson said tactfully, retreating to the kitchen with a knowing smile. Alone with Beckett, Olivia suddenly felt shy. She was acutely aware of her worn work dress and the tendrils of hair escaping from her braid, but when she looked at Beckett, she saw only warmth in his eyes. "You look well," he said. "Better than the last time I saw you." "I feel better, Mrs. Patterson has been wonderful, and having honest work to do has helped me feel useful again." She gestured to the settee. "Please sit down. Can I get you something? Water, coffee, water would be good, thank you." Olivia fetched him a glass from the kitchen, where Mrs. Patterson winked at her conspiratorially, then returned to find Beckett had settled onto the settee, his long legs stretched out before him. She handed him the water and sat in the chair across from him, trying to ignore how much she wanted to sit beside him instead. "I have been thinking about you," Beckett said after taking a long drink. "Wondering how you were managing, whether you were truly safe here." "I have been thinking about you too," Olivia admitted. "Worrying, actually. I am glad you are all right. It takes more than men like Riker to put me down." He set the glass aside and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Olivia, I need to be honest with you about something. I did not come back just to check on you. I came back because I could not stop thinking about you. These past 2 weeks, even while I was tracking the gang, you were on my mind. The way you held yourself together despite everything, your courage, your smile. I know we barely know each other, but I would like to change that, if you are interested." Olivia's breath caught in her chest. She had hoped in her secret heart that he might feel something for her beyond mere protectiveness, but hearing him say the words out loud was almost overwhelming. "I am interested," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Very interested." The smile that broke across Beckett's face was like sunrise, brilliant and transforming. "Then perhaps you would allow me to take you to dinner tonight. There is a nice restaurant on Main Street that I have been told serves excellent steak." "I would love that," Olivia said, and suddenly the world seemed full of possibility again. That evening, Olivia wore the one nice dress that had been returned to her, a deep green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Mrs. Patterson helped her arrange her blonde hair in an elegant updo and loaned her a beautiful shawl for when the evening turned cold. When Beckett arrived to collect her, dressed in clean clothes with his dark hair slicked back, she felt her pulse quicken at the sight of him. Dinner was everything she could have hoped for. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives and dreams, discovering unexpected commonalities despite their different backgrounds. Olivia learned that Beckett had grown up on a ranch in Wyoming, the oldest of 4 children, and had learned to ride and shoot before he could properly read. After his sister's disappearance, he had left home to become a bounty hunter, driven by a need to prevent other families from suffering the same loss. In turn, she told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a lawyer who had instilled in her a love of reading and learning. She spoke about her mother's death from fever when Olivia was 12, and how she and her father had grown even closer in their grief, making plans together for the future. His death from a heart attack the previous year had left her adrift, with no family and few prospects, which was why she had decided to take a chance on the West. "I used to think courage meant never being afraid," Olivia said as they lingered over coffee after the meal. "But you were right that first night. Real courage is doing what needs to be done even when you are terrified." "You have that in spades," Beckett said, his eyes intent on hers across the table. "Most people would have given up after what you went through. But you are here, starting over, making a new life. That takes incredible strength." "I had help," Olivia said softly. "I had you." Beckett reached across the table and took her hand in his calloused fingers gentle as they intertwined with hers. "I am glad I found you that night. I know it was terrible circumstances, but if I had not been tracking that gang, our paths might never have crossed, and I cannot imagine not knowing you now." They walked back to the boarding house slowly, reluctant to let the evening end. The streets of Placerville were quiet under a canopy of stars, and Olivia was intensely aware of Beckett's presence beside her, his hand warm against the small of her back. When they reached the porch of Mrs. Patterson's house, she turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I had a wonderful time, so did I." Beckett's voice was low, intimate in the darkness. "Olivia, I know this is fast, but I need you to know that I am serious about this, about you. I want to court you properly if you will have me." "Yes," Olivia breathed. "Yes, I would like that very much." He smiled and lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "Good night, Olivia. I will see you tomorrow." She watched him walk away into the night, then floated inside on a cloud of happiness to find Mrs. Patterson waiting up in the parlor, pretending to read. "That young man is smitten with you," the older woman announced with satisfaction. "And unless I miss my guess, you feel the same way about him." "I do," Olivia admitted, unable to stop smiling. "Is it crazy? We barely know each other." "Love does not follow a schedule, dear. Sometimes it strikes like lightning, fast and fierce and undeniable." Mrs. Patterson set aside her book and stood, taking Olivia's hands in hers. "Trust your heart. I have seen enough of life to know when something is real, and what you and that cowboy have is real." Over the next 3 months, Beckett courted Olivia with a mixture of old-fashioned propriety and genuine affection that stole her heart a little more each day. He took her on picnics in the foothills, taught her to ride his horse, brought her wildflowers he picked on his travels. When he had to leave town for work, he wrote her letters full of details about where he was and what he was doing, always ending with how much he missed her and looked forward to coming home to Placerville. Home. That was what this town had become for Olivia, a real home in a way Philadelphia never quite had been. She loved her work at the boarding house, loved the friends she was making among the other townspeople, loved the raw beauty of the California landscape. But most of all, she loved the life she was building with Beckett. He proposed on a warm evening in late September, taking her up into the hills overlooking the town just as the sun was setting. They stood together watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple and gold, and then Beckett dropped to one knee and pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "Olivia Carson, you are the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have shown me that there is more to life than revenge and justice, that there is also joy and love and hope. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, building a future together, making you smile every day. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she nodded vigorously. "Yes," she managed to choke out. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Beckett stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak. She kissed him back with everything she had, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into that moment. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the town church, with Mrs. Patterson and the sheriff serving as witnesses and half the town turning out to celebrate. Olivia wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and Beckett looked devastatingly handsome in a new black suit. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Beckett kissed her in front of everyone, Olivia felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They had pooled their savings to buy a small ranch just outside of town, 20 acres with a modest house and a barn that needed some repairs. Beckett planned to continue bounty hunting for a while to build up their nest egg, but his real dream was to raise horses. Olivia supported this completely, knowing how much it meant to him to have something to build toward that was not defined by violence and danger. Their first year of marriage was full of hard work and deep contentment. Olivia kept a vegetable garden and chickens, sold eggs and preserves in town to bring in extra income, and slowly transformed their simple house into a real home. Beckett took shorter jobs that kept him closer to Placerville, unwilling to be away from his wife for long stretches. In the evenings they would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the hills, and talk about their plans for the future. "I want children someday," Beckett said one night, his arm around Olivia's shoulders as they rocked gently on the porch swing he had built. "A whole houseful of them, running wild on this land, learning to ride and rope and be decent human beings." "I want that too," Olivia said, snuggling closer to his warmth. "Though perhaps not a whole houseful all at once, 2 or 3 would be plenty. Whatever you want, love. I will be happy as long as they have your eyes and your courage." "And your sense of honor," Olivia replied, tilting her head up to kiss his jaw. "You are the best man I know, Beckett Brooks." Their first child arrived exactly 1 year after their wedding, a healthy baby boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Benjamin, after Olivia's father, and watching Beckett hold their son for the first time, tears streaming down his face, Olivia knew that all the pain and fear she had endured had been worth it to get to this moment. Beckett proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving with their son, even when exhausted from ranch work. He gave up bounty hunting entirely when Benjamin was 6 months old, declaring that he would rather be a full-time horse rancher and father than spend another day away from his family chasing bad men. The decision was not entirely financial since they had built up good savings, but it was the right one. Their ranch prospered as word spread about the quality of Beckett's horses, and soon they had buyers coming from as far as Sacramento to purchase their stock. When Benjamin was 2, Olivia gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Sarah, who looked so much like her that Beckett joked he had nothing to do with creating them at all. The twins were a handful, energetic and adventurous in a way that kept both parents constantly on their toes, but they filled the house with laughter and love. By the time their children were 5, 4, and 4 respectively, the Brooks Ranch had become one of the most successful operations in the county. They had expanded to 50 acres and employed 2 ranch hands to help with the work. Olivia had also started teaching reading and arithmetic to some of the children in town whose parents could not afford proper schooling, finding deep satisfaction in helping others the way she had been helped. One evening, as they celebrated their 6th wedding anniversary with a special dinner after the children were asleep, Beckett took Olivia's hand across the table and said, "Do you ever think about that night, the night we met?" "Sometimes," Olivia admitted. "Usually when I am trying to count my blessings and realize I have too many to number." "They were going to sell you across the border at dawn," Beckett said quietly, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. "But I made sure Dawn found you free instead." "I did not know then that I was also setting myself free from the anger and grief that had driven me for so long. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Olivia." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. "We saved each other," she said, "and we built something beautiful from that terrible night. A life, a family, a home. Sometimes I cannot believe how lucky I am." "Not luck," Beckett said firmly. "Fate. We were meant to find each other, meant to love each other, meant to create this life together. I believe that with everything in me." "So do I," Olivia whispered. As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They faced the normal challenges of any marriage and family, times of illness and financial worry and simple exhaustion from the demands of ranch life and raising children. But they faced everything together, united by the bond they had forged in those first desperate hours when he had burst through that barn door and changed both their lives forever. Benjamin grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books almost as much as horses, and Beckett delighted in teaching him everything he knew about ranching and riding. The twins were wild and fearless, constantly getting into scrapes that left Olivia torn between exasperation and admiration for their spirit. When they were 7, Olivia gave birth to another son, Daniel, who proved to be the most even-tempered of all their children. By their 10th wedding anniversary, the Brooks family was a fixture in Placerville society. Beckett served on the town council, and Olivia had established a proper school in a building they had funded themselves, employing 2 teachers and educating over 30 children. They had weathered droughts and financial panics, childhood illnesses and the normal ups and downs of marriage, and emerged stronger every time. "I never imagined my life could be this full," Olivia confessed to Mrs. Patterson one afternoon. The older woman was now in her 70s and living in a small cottage on the Brooks property, having sold her boarding house and retired. "When I was sitting in that barn, terrified and alone, I thought my life was over, but it was really just beginning." "That cowboy of yours knew what he was seeing when he found you," Mrs. Patterson said with a knowing smile. "Not just a victim who needed saving, but a partner who could build a life with him. You two were meant to find each other." As their children grew older, and the ranch continued to prosper, Beckett and Olivia made it a point to help other women in situations similar to what Olivia had faced. They provided jobs and safe housing for women escaping violence or poverty, gave them a chance to rebuild their lives with dignity and purpose. It was their way of honoring what had brought them together, and ensuring that other women did not have to suffer the way Olivia had. On their 15th wedding anniversary, as they stood on the porch of their ranch house watching their 4 children play in the yard, Beckett pulled Olivia close and kissed the top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, leaning into his embrace. "About how that night changed everything," he said. "About how close I came to never knowing you. If I had been an hour later, if I had tracked them to a different location, if any number of things had gone differently, you might have been lost to me forever. It terrifies me even now." "But you were not late," Olivia said firmly, turning in his arms to face him. "You were exactly where you needed to be, exactly when you needed to be there. You saved me, and then you loved me, and then you built this beautiful life with me. That is what matters." "I love you," Beckett said, his blue eyes intense with emotion. "More now than the day I married you, more than I thought possible. You are everything to me, Olivia Brooks." "I love you too," she replied, stretching up to kiss him. "My cowboy, my hero, my husband, my love. Thank you for making sure Dawn found me free all those years ago. Thank you for choosing to be free with me," Beckett murmured against her lips. Their children called for them then, wanting help with some project in the barn, and they broke apart with shared laughter. Hand in hand, they walked down from the porch to join their family, the western sun casting long shadows across the land they had built together. Olivia thought about the scared young woman she had been, sitting in that barn waiting for dawn and a terrible fate, and marveled at how far she had come. That night had been the worst of her life, but it had also been the beginning of the best. She had been destined for slavery and suffering, but instead she had found freedom and love. Beckett had made sure of that, and in return she had given him a reason to put down his guns and pick up a life worth living. They had saved each other in every way that mattered, and the life they had created together was proof that even the darkest night could give way to the most glorious dawn. As the years rolled on, their children grew into fine young adults who carried their parents' values of compassion, hard work, and integrity. Benjamin took over more and more of the ranch operations, showing the same patience with horses that his father had. The twins shocked everyone by both becoming teachers, following their mother's example of service and education. Daniel, the youngest, showed early signs of wanting to study law, inspired by stories about his grandfather. Beckett and Olivia grew old together with grace, their love deepening into something steady and enduring, a partnership forged in crisis and strengthened by decades of shared joys and sorrows. They became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and flourish across California and beyond. On a warm spring evening when they were both in their 70s, they sat together on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Beckett's hair was silver now, his face weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were still the same vivid blue that had captured Olivia's heart so many years ago. Olivia's blonde hair had faded to white, and her face bore the lines of a life well lived, full of laughter and tears and everything in between. "You have any regrets?" Olivia asked, her hand clasped in his as they watched the sunset paint the sky. "Not a single one," Beckett replied without hesitation, "except maybe that I did not find you sooner. But then again, we might not have been ready for each other if we had met any earlier. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to." "Even the terrible parts?" Olivia asked softly. "Even those," Beckett confirmed, "because they led us here. To this life, this family, this love. I would walk through fire to have this, Olivia. I would face 1,000 nights like that one if it meant I got to spend the rest of my life with you." Olivia squeezed his hand, her heart full to bursting. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere in the house behind them, they could hear the sounds of their family gathering for dinner, multiple generations coming together under one roof. Their grandson was practicing piano, the notes floating out through the open windows. Their eldest great-granddaughter was laughing at something, the sound bright and joyful. This was what freedom looked like, Olivia thought. Not just the absence of chains and captivity, but the presence of love and family and purpose. Beckett had given her physical freedom that long-ago night, but together they had built something even more precious. A life of meaning and connection, of love that multiplied and spread like ripples on water. "Thank you," she whispered to her husband. "For what?" Beckett asked, though his eyes were warm with understanding. "For everything. For being exactly where you needed to be that night. For seeing me as more than a victim. For loving me so well all these years. For this life we built together." "No," Beckett said, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "Thank you, for surviving, for being brave enough to trust me, for choosing to build a life with me instead of letting fear win, for loving me back, for being my partner in all things. You made me a better man, Olivia. You gave me a reason to lay down my guns and pick up a life worth living." They sat together as twilight deepened into night, wrapped in the warmth of a love that had been tested by fire and proven unbreakable. They had started with nothing but fear and determination, and they had built an empire of love and family. The ranch that surrounded them, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who bore their legacy, the lives they had touched through kindness and generosity, all of it was a testament to the truth that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. They planned to sell her across the border at dawn, but the cowboy had made sure dawn found her free instead. And in that freedom, they had discovered something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. A love that would last a lifetime and beyond, a partnership that would weather every storm, a happiness so deep and true that it transformed everything it touched. As the stars began to emerge overhead, Beckett pulled Olivia closer and she rested her head on his shoulder, both of them content to simply be together. They had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love and purpose. And they would face whatever years remained the same way they had faced everything else. Together, hand in hand, heart to heart, free in every way that mattered.